Hi, here we are at Skywagon's podcast, episode 2. And I thought that today we're going to talk about flying, but indirectly because our guest here is Don, the cameraman. He's the guy behind the scenes that does all the work after I turn up for an hour and pose around with the catering truck and makeup and all the other equipment we don't have. Don makes it work.
In the famous words of Aussie Man, here's me face.
Yeah, so Don's not just an editing camera guy. Don's got a lot of flying career history behind him, and we're going to talk about that. So, what happened?
What do you mean, what happened?
How was it? How did you, you've been around planes all your life, pretty much.
Well, first I was a twinkle in my father's eye, and too far back?
Come forward like 22 years.
Yeah, so I had a 21-year military career. Some people would, question whether it was actually the military. I was in the Air Force for 21 years. I tried to join the Army, but they found out my parents knew each other. They wouldn't let me in. So started out security police because the Air Force said you'd make a good police officer. And after 12 years, I was superintendent of a squadron. And I figured, well, now what, And
Based where?
Well, I was Kadena Air Base in Japan, and then I went to Kunsan Air Base, Korea. And then everybody kept going to Minot, North Dakota, so I extended, and everyone was still going to Minot, North Dakota, so I extended again. So I spent 3 years there, and then they sent me to Minot, North Dakota, where I spent 2 years, 2 months too long. Before, they sent me back to Kunsan. And everyone was going back to Minot, so I extended another year. And
for people who don't know, Minot, North Dakota is in the winter.
Freezing is the reason.
It's minus, it's like 40
it's so cold.
Below.
You have to plug your car in. You have to plug a block heater in your car, or your car won't start in the winter.
The battery will freeze.
Well, no, the oil will basically become sludge.
Yeah.
It just won't start.
Yeah.
So you got to keep the engine warm with a heater. Anyway, I went back to Kunsan, and then I ended up getting stationed up at Suwon for 2 years, and then from there, Vandenberg. And at Vandenberg, I retrained.
And Vandenberg is in California.
In California.
Yeah. And the other ones were in Korea.
Yeah, and Japan. And
that was a Korea move
North
then.
Dakota. A Korea.
So, but you were flying.
Yeah, so after Vandenberg, I decided to retrain, and C5 Loadmaster was open, and so I retrained into that, and that was my second childhood.
And what's the C5?
Biggest cargo aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Basically, it's the box that everything else comes in. Tanks, boats, planes, helicopters, buses.
Helicopters.
Yeah, you put helicopters in.
Big ones.
Depending on the size of the helicopter determines the number of helicopters you can put in.
How big?
The one that the president flies in, shove it right in there.
Really?
Yeah.
So what kind of, just ballpark tonnage, how much can they carry?
Gosh, it's been now, 20 plus, 30 years. 30 years since I was in the Air Force.
They're still flying the same planes.
Yeah, I know, but I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. But figure 6 buses, and you still got plenty of room to spare.
6 buses.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus fuel and passengers.
And passengers even.
Somebody who's an active duty loadmaster, please put in the comments what the C5 can do, or I will add a graphic later.
Yeah, because you're the editor.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll put
but passengers, really?
Yeah, 73 passengers up top. There's a bulkhead between the passenger compartment and the crew compartment. Crew compartment has room for 18, 20 people, and then 6 bunks.
So there was rotating crew. What's the range? I mean, where would you go? How far could it go?
It's unlimited because you have aerial refueling, which is fun. Because the aerial refueling, and you're flying in, and there's a boom operator and a KC-10 KC-10, because the 135s are basically, there's not that many left. Anyway, they put the boom into the pocket, and it just starts pumping gas. And the pilot's trying to fly, and he's got lights, and he's trying to stay in the green. And I tried doing it in a simulator one time, and I put in these pilot-induced oscillations, and I just could not.
But the guy flying the boom, he can help, right?
Yeah, the guy flying the boom helps, but the pilot is really, he's got to keep it on there.
How close are you?
Pretty close enough so that when you're refueling, the wing vortices of the refueler are hitting the T-tail of the C5, and the whole back end of the C5 is just shaking like.
There's no autopilot for that.
No, and some people get airsick. I always thought it was fun. I just thought it was a gas. It was really interesting to see.
So going all over the world in those. But so how do you work out what is a loadmaster's job in a C5?
Well, the loadmaster basically sleeps and then drinks beer.
But between those,
yeah, in between you're pushing the cargo on and supervising that and making sure that it's tied down so it doesn't move around in flight. You may remember that one airplane coming out of the Middle East. It took off, did a nose high, and then augered in because the cargo shifted to the back. It wasn't tied down when they took off.
So it's probably very critical about
right. So you want to make sure the
gravity.
weight and balance is correct. If you put too much weight in the front of an airplane, it doesn't take off and fly, and that's okay because taking off and flying, that's optional. But if you put too much weight in the back end of the airplane, then it will take off, but it won't really land right, and that's bad because landings are always mandatory. And so you want to get it in the middle where it's balanced, and then it flies as advertised. And then the other thing is, the geometric considerations. You don't want to bend, spindle, mutilate the airplane by putting a big square peg into a round hole, or exceeding the weight of the floors. So, yeah, it was just making sure the airplane didn't get broke and weight and balance and tie down.
And what's it like up front in a C5? Is it like a giant walk-around sitting room with a couple of chairs in it?
It's pretty roomy. You've definitely got some man space up there. But, once you're in the seat, you're pretty tight. But it's been, like I said, so many years. They've rebuilt the C5s. They got glass panels now and new engines. We used to have this really high-pitched whine on the engine. Now I don't even recognize it.
When you see them fly, like when we fly to the Bay Area over Travis and you see one in the air, it seems like it's barely moving.
Yeah.
It's like a sort of an aluminium overcast, barely moving.
I think they're doing about 120 on final, so they're moving pretty quick.
Yeah. But just because they're so big. I was going over Travis once, and there was one under me, and you're looking down on a C5 from a Mooney.
Fun.
And the Travis approach is pointing out the traffic to the C5, and it would be like a fly swat on its windshield.
Yeah. They're big airplanes, no doubt about it.
So from then, flying in the C5s, what next?
Retirement. And one of my buddies, he says to me, "Hey, Don, you should go into sales. People like you, and you can make a lot of money." And I'm like, "Make a lot of money? You just said the magic words."
Sales of?
Well, I went into insurance, and I also sold computer training. And I have never hated a job so much in my life as doing sales. I quit, and I felt my soul leave my body. It was absolutely the last thing I should ever be doing.
Well, I tried in England years ago sales of insurance because I like selling things. But I've discovered since, unless you like the thing you're selling, you can't sell it enthusiastically. Like, you can't go in the hangar and look at a sales brochure of an insurance policy. You go in the hangar and look at a 185.
Well, I get excited about 185s. I do not get excited about insurance.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in the Air Force, they did a personality evaluation. They said, "This guy make a good police officer." So they put me in security police. And so as I was getting out, I took a couple of assessments, and they all said you should be a police officer. So that's why I went into sales.
But you wanted to be a pilot.
I wanted it to say you'll be a commercial pilot. So I took 3 of them, and on the third one, I was really trying to tweak my answer so it would say you should be a pilot. And what it ended up saying was you should either be a police officer or a flight engineer. And I'm like, oh,
wrong seat.
I missed it by that much.
Yeah.
And so after a couple of these sales jobs, I was at my grandmother's house, and I told her, I just don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And my grandmother looks
Aged?
40.
All right.
She looks right at me, and she said, "Yeah, just like Trevor, starting something new late in life." So, but at least I'm not wearing the same shoes.
Yeah, you brought your own.
Yeah. So my grandmother looks at me, and she says, "Well, I always thought you should be a police officer."
Did she know that other people had already suggested it?
No, she did.
Oh.
She had no idea.
Okay.
She had no idea about the profiles that I'd taken, and so when she said that, I'm like, okay, I give up. So I applied, and I got accepted and hired on at Concord, California. I was a police officer.
So that's East Bay.
East San Francisco Bay Area, and that was 10 of the best years of my life.
Why?
I loved being a cop. I loved it like I've never done a job that I enjoyed more.
Really?
And people look at you like you're nuts. But you know what?
And when was this, starting and finishing?
Let's see. I started in 2000, between 2000 and 2001, and I ended in 2010. I only did it for 10 years.
Were you flying in your part-time a bit?
Yeah, a little bit. I was flying a little bit. Rentals from, I was still part of the Travis Air Force Base Aero Club, so I could go.
So you'd been flying in Korea, small stuff.
Yep.
So tell us the small stuff and then the gap.
Right, so I learned to fly in 1987 while I was stationed at at Suwon Air Base. I'd go down to Osan Air Base where they had the Aero Club, and I shared the airspace with A-10s and F-16s, and it was some pretty interesting flying.
Yeah,
And then I learned in a 152. I don't know what engine it had. It's been
bigger than normal,
but bigger than normal. It would do like 120 knots. And so when I got back to the United States and I was, still a fresh pilot, I had no idea that there were different models and different engines. And
you do now.
Oh, I do now, yeah, because I work at Skywagons. But so I do a flight plan with the numbers from memory, and I'm getting close to I'm about to run out of gas because this pig was only doing 90 knots instead of 120.
Okay, yeah, not the same engine.
Yeah. So that's when I kind of figured out, you've got to use the book for each airplane that you're flying. You can't just go off of numbers because it's a 152 and another 152. They could be completely different aircraft.
And you told me once you flew Cherokee 6s?
Yeah, they had a Cherokee 6 300 at the Vandenberg Air Force Base Aero Club, and I flew that.
There goes one now.
Yeah. And that was a great airplane.
But never owned a plane of your own?
Not until I came here.
Yeah. And then you were under the impression, like a lot of other people, that I fly a lot of Moonies, and if you're interested in Moonies and they're all model year changes, go to Skywagon University and you'll see me talking all about a lot of different planes, Don filming. But you were your first private plane was a Cessna 310.
I bought a Cessna 310.
Straight in at the deep end.
Well, I learned to fly. I learned to fly in a 310. It was a B model while I was at Vandenberg.
So straight tail, tuna tanks.
Yeah, tuna tanks, big block, square tail. And my flight instructor's name was Joachim Jofers, Swedish guy. He's now...
Just quickly, a 310, if anybody doesn't know, is a Cessna twin engine, two IO 470s, 260 horsepower side. I mean, it's a big first plane.
But I'd been flying other airplanes, so I had a little more experience. It wasn't like I jumped in after 40 hours of,
In a 152.
Right. I mean, sure, some people do it, but yeah. Anyway, I had a few hours behind me. I had over, I don't know, I was coming up on 800 hours when I bought the 310.
Okay.
Anyway, big maintenance hog. Maintenance hog, fuel hog, and I always thought Moonies were too small, uncomfortable. I'm not going to fit. I'm not going to be comfortable. Anyway, we were flying in your Mooney, and my wife was in the back seat. And I remember this to this day, how it ended up that I ended up in a Mooney.
Sorry.
We're flying along, and you point at the airspeed indicator, and you go, Dawn, look, 160 knots, 9 gallons of fuel. And my wife's head just snapped. And she's like, what?
Compared to?
24 gallons and 170 knots.
10 more knots for 3 times the gas.
Well, we thought with the 310, we're going to fly along and we're going to take all our friends. We're going to carry a bunch of gear and it's a really stable, fun platform. And turns out, like most people, we were wrong. We flew just the two of us and just our bags, and we didn't need that big an airplane to begin with. But it was a lot of fun to fly.
Yeah, and redundancy with that other engine.
Yeah. And so I remember I was flying a Mooney from here to Vermont, extended range tanks, 105 gallons.
Yes.
And I flew an 8-hour leg, trying to get ahead of the weather. How do I get ahead of this weather? Let's try saying the words in English. Yeah. I tried to get ahead of the weather, and so I ended up flying an 8-hour leg. And then I landed, and I didn't have to refuel.
That plane would have done 10 and a half hours.
Oh, it was long enough.
So
Anyway,
you landed for oil.
Actually, it didn't burn any oil. It was a great plane. I landed, and I tried to find a hotel. I was in some little tiny place that just happened to be along my route. There's a hotel, but no car that would come get me. No Uber, no taxi. I ended up sleeping in the plane. No blanket. I just pulled my jacket over my head and slept in the back. And I thought, you know what? Got up the next morning, daybreak, flew it to Vermont, delivered it that plane was very comfortable. If you can fly an 8-hour leg followed by a 5-hour leg and you're not broken, you've got a comfortable plane.
And all your Gatorade bottles are still full.
Yeah.
But you do now own a plane. So Don sold planes here briefly as a gap filler for what?
Because remember, sales not my thing.
6 months or so.
Yeah, about 6 months.
And in that time, we bought an inventory plane that you fell in love with and kept.
Right. So, well, actually, that's sort of correct.
The second one.
I bought one airplane and I was going to keep it. And then I found an airplane in the Midwest somewhere, and I went out and got it. I think it was in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
It was in Kentucky because I remember I had some really, really good beverages while I was there, adult style. And so I flew it back, and by the time I got home, I'm like...
And what was it?
A Mooney 201, a 94. And by the time
MSE.
I got home, I'm like, I love this plane. I'm keeping this one. The one I bought to keep, I'm selling.
Right. So there were 2 201s.
And I've still got it.
Yeah.
But I can't fly it.
Right. So when you've had that now for about 10 years, 9 years?
The Mooney?
Yeah.
No. 5, 6 years?
Okay.
Yeah.
And why can't you fly it now?
I had a single episode of atrial fibrillation over a year ago, and the FAA grounded me.
So that's like a
little flutter in the heart.
But it wasn't where you fell over and lay on the floor.
No. I didn't even know I had it. If it weren't for my Apple Watch saying, hey, buddy, there's something wrong with your heart. You got AFib going. I'm like, what? I don't have AFib. So after the watch nagging at me for a little while, I looked at my wife. I'm like, honey, my watch is telling me I got AFib. And she's like, well, we should probably go to the hospital and have it checked.
Time to go to the doctor.
So I get to the hospital, and they're like, nah, your watch couldn't possibly be right. You look fine. I'm like, yeah, I feel fine. So they put a bunch of leads on me, and sure enough, my heart was an AFib. And
why?
Well, so I'm not a doctor. I can't prove it. But what I suspect happened was I began taking a allergy medication over the counter. I don't want to say the name because, they're not evil. They do good work. It's just that for me, I don't think it worked. I don't think it was good for me. There's a clinical study that shows that a small percentage of the population will go into AFib while taking this medication. And I think I'm one of them. And the reason is I quit taking that medication.
And it stopped.
And there's no AFib. And I had a single case of AFib, and the FAA grounded me, and I had to jump through a bunch of hoops. I had to do a whole tranche of testing. I sent that off to them. They're like, yeah, we don't have enough information to determine, if you can fly or not. So I did another tranche of testing. And they said, no, we still don't have enough. And we want you to give us 12 months of CPAP data in the next 60 days. Well, I've never been given a CPAP.
Yeah.
I don't have the data. So I kept asking, well, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then they said, denied, you can't fly anymore unless you do this tranche of testing. The FAA says we don't deny very many medicals, but what they do is they make it so incredibly difficult that and expensive that you can't you just quit.
But you haven't quit, and you're going to keep going, and you still have the Mooney.
Right. I'm not quitting. I'm still trying. I've done the last tranche of testing. Every doctor I've talked to says I see nothing here that would stop you from flying. But I mean, I'm probably out of pocket $9,000 because none of the doctors that you have that the FAA requires you to go see are in your circle of insurance carriers. And they're all like FAA specialists, so you have to use them. And so it's been an expensive endeavor, but I'm just not going to quit because I've still got a lot of good flying. I mean, I'm healthy.
Yeah. How old now?
I'm 62.
62, yeah. And no other AFib since that one thing?
No, just that one.
No.
Anyway, we'll get through it,
We might talk about that more when it's all over, the whole process, and go through it. But
it hasn't been pleasant.
No, exactly. But for now, I just thought that it would be good if everybody met Don and had a bit of a chat. And then...
Yeah. Hey, I want to say thank you to all of our viewers, the people who watch our videos and our podcast. Thank you so much for making this successful. We couldn't do it without you. And if you think maybe you'd like to be on the podcast, you can contact us and come on here and sit where I'm sitting and talk to Mark, or we're figuring out how to do it remotely. So if you're, geographically dislocated and you can't get here and you want to be a part of it, well, we can do it over the internet, and we'll figure that all out and get you online here. But if you like what we do, subscribe, hit the little bell. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead. You take it.
We can do it together.
Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Be sure to contact us if you want to be on one of our podcasts. We'd love to have you. And again, thanks so much for watching.
Thanks very much.